I'd like to welcome Leander Schlicht, Head of Legal from Wacken. It's the world's largest heavy metal festival. Welcome, Lutz. And we have Managing Director of WILDKAT PR, Kathleen, Alder. It's a creative agency for culture and music, which she will also tell us more about. Welcome. Great for having you. And our latest edition, Lutz, thank you. Great you could make it. It's a spokesman for Clubkommission Berlin and also the initiator of UNITEDWESTREAM. So Lutz, welcome to the panel.
Hi, sorry for the wrong login.
No worries. That's why we make sure we have digital backup. And so now we're back on. So welcome to this panel. And obviously we know that the music industry has had a very hard hit. It's not just all the various stakeholders, but even let's say the normal George and Sandra walking on the streets that are not able to partake in many of these activities. So it was very important for us to be able to address these questions as to what's going on in the industry right now, especially with COVID, and what opportunities might there be in terms of using technology, so in general. But what I would like to ask first is, before Corona happened, what were your guys' experience and what was your status quo with tech before Corona for the organization that you're representing? Maybe we can start with Leander and then go to Kat and then Lutz.
Sure. Well, thank you for the question. Our experiences, well, we're very interested in all sorts of technology. I don't know if you've seen that at the event, the Wacken 2020 and 2019 and 18 editions. We had a huge gaming area, actually the largest German ESL arena that was not in a stadium. So we've looked into various fields that we find very interesting. Technology will be the game changer, and I think we all know this. Even though we're rock and roll and we do things differently than most other promoters, we're very interested in what the industry and the technology industry has to say and actually does. We've been to various trade shows. We're looking at startups coming up. We keep a very close relationship to young, businesses, entrepreneurs. I've met Kat actually a couple of 3 years ago. I think it was in 2017 at the Caragen Music and Tech Conference in Salzburg. It was on her panel actually, talking about data protection and data usage and stuff like that. So it's something we've been very interested in, even though we understand it's very difficult to implement into a very analog world, actually. And I think if we're looking at the digital world and tech, a lot of people go to festivals and go to concerts to actually be not in a digital surrounding, not be on Instagram and not be in the social medias, what we have, what we're consuming all day long. And still there is an area where we, both can come together and actually make it even a better experience and a better product. And even, for younger artists that we, have to keep in mind, that's the content we're all using. And that's so important. And to give them in times like these, to give them a stage and something to do. And tech helps. And I guess we'll come to this later on, but really interesting. So there's various ways we're now using technology that we haven't, and we were looking at it, and we're doing it even closer now.
Okay, so these were things that you obviously considered in the past, and now there's been a driving force with the crisis to maybe implement some of these things.
Yeah, it's amplified by everything on the digital side, just because we had to, and then we wanted to on the other hand as well. But yeah, it amplified, definitely.
So Kathleen, how about you guys? How involved were you guys with tech? I mean, not to say as compared to now, because I think we're going to get into that, but what was your experience before Corona?
So I mainly work at WILDKAT in the more cultural, creative industries that doesn't necessarily include pop and kind of the really mainstream music industry, but more theatre, dance, classical music, jazz, kind of embassy work that kind of combine lots of different disciplines. And we always felt we're quite a young agency, quite large now. We received venture capital last year and are based in London, Berlin, Paris, LA, and New York. And we kind of see quite a lot of different kind of developments in the different cities that we work in. But I would say before the crisis, there was social and digital somewhat was put together as a byproduct to everything else that people were doing, kind of reluctantly having to add it on. And most people saw it more as a burden, an additional cost to their organization or to their project. And didn't really see the full value of it. So they always felt the live experience or the actual product is worth more. And they were more interested in capturing the actual audiences who were coming or who were buying, and didn't really see the tech side as kind of a valuable kind of next to the live product. And so we always spend a lot of time educating and working out what is worth it for our clients and which products they should think about, which apps they should work with, which relationships with tech companies they should be investing in, be it social media companies, but also the big, tech giants, etc. So I would say beforehand, it was always the individual artists who've seen quite a lot of value in collaborating or celebrating with a tech company or coming up with their own app or being quite forward thinking on digital side. And I always felt the bigger organizations were the ones who were a bit sluggish about it and kind of not necessarily that excited by tech, or quite, to be really general. Obviously there are always exceptions, but I would probably say that in my world, that was more the case, that an embassy wouldn't really invest on a big tech side for their festival or for their creative cultural element. And so I think beforehand, it was a real mix, and the artists were probably the ones who are more digitally savvy and forward thinking, while the big organizations were a bit sluggish and behind on that, I would say.
Okay, because Lutz, I know for when it comes to UNITEDWESTREAM, that seems, that's a product that derived, is that correct? It's an actual product that came from the crisis itself, or is it something you guys had put together? Okay, so what was your status quo, let's say, from your experiences in the Berlin Club Commission in the scene with tech, and then moving on to creating UNITEDWESTREAM?
Yeah, I think it's something which also has to develop a bit, because you always grow with your audience, and you also see that club culture is also a bit a counterculture in many ways. So if people are more digitalized and online and taking pictures and communicate digitally, that that people who go to clubs and to festivals maybe are looking for the opposite. So it's always a thin line, also when it comes to sharing data and being anonymous. A lot of, especially in this crisis, a lot of clubs were really concerned about now sharing data of their audience, because a lot of people, I mean, in Germany, you're probably not as in a danger of what happens to your data, but if you look out over the borders to other countries where there's also repression towards the LGBTQ communities, etc., I think you have to be very careful as a club culture what you do with data and how you handle it. My personal background is tech, so I was starting 1999 with an internet startup about nightlife in Germany. We are quite early in that stage. We try to motivate the audience to generate user-generated content, and since then, of course, a lot of things develop. But on the other hand, yeah, I think when it comes to make things more efficient, to use it to organize your stuff, to be a bit more organized internally, I think all kinds of software are helpful. When it comes to reaching out to the audience, of course, there's also a lot of technology involved. Nobody really prints flyers or put up posters anymore. More like, if you do it it's more an artistic way of presenting yourself, and not really necessarily to reach your audience efficiently. Yeah, and then it comes to the whole visualization, digital art in venues, at festivals, which is also big growing movement, which also get more and more access to venues. And UNITEDWESTREAM is probably more a solution for a crisis. It's not club culture, it's a TV production. What we do is we are trying to create a campaign to reach out to a lot of people, show them that behind club culture is art, are people on empty stages in front of empty dance floors, and that's what we want to show. That's our message. But if you're there at one of these streams, it's actually a very sad situation. You know, an artist on stage always has to interact with the audience, and that's obviously not possible. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so for I think UNITEDWESTREAM will have a future as a platform, a global movement. We are now in 74 cities. We have more than 1,800 artists performed on a digital stage in the last 3 or 4 weeks. So it is quite something you probably could not handle in the analog world. But yeah, but I think we also have to be very careful where we use technology in this field, where people actually want to, you know, leave the world behind and experience individual contact.
Well, because this panel is really interesting, if we take a step back, because we're looking at, you know, Leander and Wacken's coming from the festival side, you know, Kathleen and WILDKAT PR is, you know, more the classical artists, and then Lutz kind of has the background of the clubs, especially here in Berlin. So is the consensus amongst the three of you that maybe before Corona, the audience was a little bit more hesitant to be open to tech changes?
Oh, I think, I don't know, that's hard to answer. I think in classical music and the cultural sector that we were in, people tend to kind of like to try something quite late on. So streaming took on probably only properly last year in classical music, kind of really on a high level. So I'd probably say people weren't really that keen on technology. They were really keen on the live events, and that was it, and didn't really see the technology side of it as a real product as part of experiencing classical music and culture. And that certainly changed. And I think they're generally, from a demographic, more ones that are a bit slower on adapting to that. I'd say, on the other hand, the artists in our sector are normally quite young still and very innovative on that side. So you always have a bit slightly that disparity between the audience and their age and what they're interested in and what they want from the experience, and also the artists who are often very young and who are more tech savvy and would like to do more. So I think there's always a bit of a kind of disbalance in that sense.
Yeah, I couldn't really say that's the case. Actually, we're seeing way more visitors of the real event, which is actually streamed into the internet through various platforms, up to 500,000 at a time, from all around the world, which is just because they're incapable of ever going to Wacken, ever coming, because we have huge fan base, South America, India, Asia, places like Indonesia, which actually has the Prime Minister is a huge fan, and actually they have a female metal band down there, which is really popular, and that's something very special for Indonesia, and that gives a community like down there a way of participating in something like this, which would otherwise be almost impossible to ever go to. So, and every other way that we've tried to implement any sort of technology was always well received. I think it's more of the question if we did it right, if we used the right ways to do it, because if you want to do it right, and if you want to do a good job in implementing something of value, that's very difficult, and it's also very expensive. And we do see a lot of young artists that use Twitch for their program, more now than before, but they've done this before, and we see artists from around the globe that use their Twitch channel for the music and also for live streaming of their gaming profession, and that there's a lot of things coming together. So I think we couldn't really say that there is any hesitation towards technology. It's actually something a lot of people enjoy. Other people don't, but that's okay, and that's just how our very diverse world is. And it should, you know, we should offer. That's how we see live entertainment. We should offer anything to the fan, like, you know, any festivals that we see today, and this is not just us, but every other major festival offers so many various different areas and products to their fans that make it a real interesting experience for everybody. And really the thing is to do it right and to produce something of value. And I think VR is actually something very interesting because it was so big, it was promoted all over. And really, I don't see a lot of VR around, especially not in live entertainment and anywhere else. I think there is applications for that, but they're small.
And I was just going to say, before we get to Lutz, because I think it's a really good point to highlight, you know, you have to do it right. And I know, Leander, that you guys had actually tested VR, right? And what was your, I mean, at that time, what was your guys' learning when you implemented it? Because I feel like that kind of connects to maybe the thread where you were talking about maybe doing it right.
Well, our learning from it is, I guess, that you have to do, you know, you have to be quite early. It doesn't matter. It doesn't really make sense to be the last one on the train to be implementing some technology that might be good or might be not good just because everybody else is doing it. But I think really it's if it's good, if it's creating value, and if you do it right, if you create an experience for somebody that, for example, wouldn't be able to experience something because of a disability or any a distance, you know, or any other reason, then there might be a value in it. But just, you know, to go to the festival and wear some VR goggles and run around, you don't only look stupid, but your experience is not as great as it is, you know, standing at the bar drinking a beer with a couple of buddies. And that,
right?
Excuse me?
This is something you guys had actually tested at the festival to actually implement the VR at the festival.
Yeah, everyone. Yeah, it's a while ago, and that was when VR wasn't that big and it wasn't as widely available. And we've looked at you know, into VR in various ways, looking at how to create value at an affordable price. For example, to those that would, you know, enjoy that sort of experience because of we were looking at specifically in terms of disabled people with an inability to move or see or hear. And there are those goggles today that can not only produce a visual image, but also, you know, sound or noise or vibration in order to communicate content. And I think that's very important to look at these things and to actually understand what value it can create. But if it doesn't really, if you're only doing it for the purpose of having VR, that's the wrong approach.
Right, perfect. Yeah, perfect. Because we also, I think VR now obviously might be more of an acceptable product to be using. As we saw, I guess, Travis Scott, who I don't know very much about, but I guess in the music industry, that was astronomical because they got 27 million viewers. And I think it broke a lot of records. But before we get too far, Lutz, why don't you give us quick your point on the consensus to whether or not people even in the club scene in Berlin, were hesitant to tech a little bit before Corona, because I think what I'd like to address is that there is a huge culture change and shift, and then we can move on to the opportunities that are being offered now.
Yeah, I can relate to what Leander said. I think it is important that you create value and you also explain to the audience what you're doing and why you're doing it. I remember there was a big discussion about tracking wristbands at some festivals that need, you know, when you first use something like that people have a payment system, but cannot really see how much money is on there. You know, some people feel like exposed and tracked and everything. So I think it is very important that if you use these like new technology and you introduce them, and even especially if they're mandatory to the audience, I think then you need to have create a lot of awareness, and in case you decide to do it, because I don't think it's always a good idea to do everything which is available on the technology side. Yeah, I think, to be honest, the audience is very open towards technology, like digital art, all kinds of things to experience, visuals, projections, mappings, all these kind of things are really interesting and but also costly in many ways, but that is something what the audience really appreciate. And a lot of great artists are popping up everywhere doing this at festivals and in clubs. Yeah, I think it's really, we're talking in the club scene, we're talking about communities, we're talking about people identify with club culture, with the people who are running this. And so there needs to be a lot of awareness what you're doing and why you're doing it and explaining it. Yeah, or if you're just doing it because it's more efficient, something like that. Yeah. But I also know some festival organizers, not in the league of Wacken, of course, more like small organizers who really have a very small staff, and they are really well organized with their own kind of software set to manage, all kinds of forms and yeah, crowd management, organizing your staff, being really, really efficient with that. And I'm really impressed by seeing this, while other festivals in the same size have a big staff and they can do it with a lot fewer people. And of course, that money you can then spend more on site and invest it in the experience. So yeah, I think skepticism is always good. We shouldn't be too happy about all the technology that people want to implement. But I definitely agree with Leander. I think if our audience is also used to a lot of high level technology, and if you do something and it doesn't really work, or you have this kind of VR experience which is not as close as you have already in your living room, so why using it, why doing it, experience it live.
Right. So now that we talked pre-corona, now let's get to the really exciting part of in corona. Why don't we, and I think we could just make the round, and if you have any numbers, that'd be great, or just like the stories, but tell us who was affected in your case. If someone isn't familiar with your part of the industry, tell us how many or who was affected, and then what was your guys's, automatic, this is our solution, like this is what we have to do. Maybe we can start with Wacken, because I know Leander has a very nice message in his background.
I don't know if I have a nice message, but well, it affected everybody. In the live entertainment industry, everybody was affected globally. I don't think we've ever seen something like that before. Like one industry that was shut down instantly at the same time. That's very difficult for everybody involved, like the artists, the promoters, agencies, all of the suppliers. I mean, we forget about those guys building the stages, and putting up fences, and they have no job in the summer, and definitely the year is gone. We figured this out pretty early in the game, and thought about what can we do, and it's maybe time to give something back in times where nobody can really do anything. And we put a team together that worked with high pressure on a solution, and actually we've created a digital event while everybody else was creating digital events, and we thought this is still a great idea, and what are we going to do different? So we put together, and we wanted this to be global, and you can see this is Wacken worldwide. We did not only create a new logo, It's at the same event dates that the Wacken Open Air would usually be on. It's called the WWW, Wacken Worldwide, and it will be live streaming with our partner, and it will be implemented. We've actually created a new app, which is in testing right now, and it's already been confirmed by the big platforms. It will go live within, I think, the next couple of 24, 48 hours. It'll be free. The entire content will be free, and there will be loads of bands from all around the globe playing in various locations in the world, which I'm not allowed to say. I think there's a couple in Los Angeles, in old school clubs. There's some from a cave, some from like local places, really all around the globe. And then we were trying to think about how to match this with the fan experience, and we wanted to give those guys a base too, because nobody can come to Wacken. We really don't want anybody to come to Wacken because there'll be nothing on it. It'll be just you know, not a good experience for nobody. So we're coming to the fans, and actually we've created a chat platform. We integrated into the app, which is specifically created for this event. Fans will have an option to create their own ID, which will in the future see many more options. I think that's great. Be early, be sign up for the ID. And actually we've asked the fans to create fan camps around the globe that can actually stream as well into the platform, and we can have fans from Japan interact with fans in Jakarta or Costa Rica. And so they're working very hard to put in these fan cams together. We have peer cams as well. We'll do our own things, and we have XR studios, which produce XR content, which is currently has not been used in live entertainment before.
Can you what does XR stand for? It's something I'm not familiar with.
It's a new way of streaming live content on a virtual stage that has actual background, and you know, it'll check it out. It'll look good. It's what they're using to create these Star Wars movies, for example. Right now, Hollywood is using a lot of XR stages. Yeah, it would be too complicated to explain it. I wouldn't know enough about it to tell you what it is exactly. But there'll be very many ways, and Lutz was actually referring to this because we've seen so many artists playing on empty stages in their living rooms or anywhere else. It's a pretty sorry experience, which is still great, but we've seen too much of that. So we thought about what can we do? What's the difference? What can we offer? And actually, we figured that is something we want to do. And actually, we want to use tech to create value and to create something with the artists in times where they cannot interact with the fans. Give them a way to interact with their fans, and to give the fans that cannot interact with everybody else, because that is one of the main experience at a festival or at a concert or anywhere else in public where, you know, people gather for a live entertainment experience, to give them a way of interacting in times where it's not possible. And yeah, we're very excited about this. Like I said, the app will go online. It'll be through the website. There'll be a stream as well. But it's free, and I think it's something to give back in times where, you know, nobody has it. You know, like a lot of suppliers, a lot of artists have no jobs, and actually we created a way of hiring a lot of people to produce this, from tech studios to actual putting up a stage in a studio to film it, from the suppliers to the artists to the fans, and I think it's a very sound setting, and if that is what we expect it to be, I think we in the future we can see more of this, actually, even in you know, parallel to a physical event, and to make this something that lasts, because it is a huge investment. And as I said before, technology, if you do it right, is very expensive. And we're really looking forward to, you know, moving faster in that direction, and to create something that's even better year after year.
And I think that's definitely going to be something to look forward to. And if when we get to Lutz, I'm sure Lutz will be able to give us some insights as to some of the learnings you might have had with UNITEDWESTREAM, and what that effect must have been like for artists in the audience. But let's go to classical music before we get to the Kathleen. So what you guys, and what was the game like? Where did you guys go
in our field? Yeah, I think it went through quite a lot of stages, to be honest. I mean, we have about 40 clients on our books, and also the different countries reacted differently at different times. So Germany and the UK felt quite similar, and the US and other territories felt very different on how things developed there. But I think it first of all started that every bigger organization, a lot of them are state subsidized, meaning they're not immediately massively worried about money or the audience income that they need. So a lot of orchestras we work with, or embassies, etc., they have, you know, state funding, and classical music very often is not actually about the audience numbers. So it's a minus making, loss making business very often anyway. They pay more than they should be for a lot of artists or projects. And so that was an interesting development, because it wasn't this panic that was maybe more in other industries and the big commercial festivals about, shit, we've lost all our money and all our income stream, because the maths in classical music and culture often are related around donors and fundraising and foundations who pay a big chunk anyway. So a lot of the big organizations, the first couple of months, just threw the entire archive online, made everything free, and said, look here, we're streaming, and look at all our online activities and everything that we've got, and all our old concerts and blah, blah, blah. And there was almost like a crazy competition on how much you could put online and what you want to watch, and, you know, free at the Met and free here and check that out and da, da, da. And it got a bit like an overflow of, you know, content that you could consume for free, and no one really knew where to go, what to do. I think the biggest kind of sacrifice was for the individual artists, people who are players or orchestra players or individual quartet players or artists who are freelancers, because they have the entire income around the live sector. So I heard from a friend who's a cellist in a quartet. She normally earns about 30 to 40,000 euros a year, and she got state subsidy of 2,000 for the entire year. So that's kind of, they are the ones who really, they didn't really get caught in any of the big programs or any of the big kind of state programs that supported businesses and supported big venues, or, you know, the different elements. They really fall between the cracks of being self-employed. So I think the first stage was in panic and in an infiltration of a lot of free stuff where everyone could. The second stage is kind of developing now. So there's a lot of new ideas coming through, like the Pierre Boulez in Berlin, for example, just made up a new festival of new music exclusively online. With they are using empty concert halls to produce the music and then putting it online. There are people who are trying out different models of paying for live events online. So you basically pay as much as you can afford or you want to go online. So there are kind of different ideas coming through slowly. And in my sector, I had to laugh, Leander, when you said about Twitch, for example, because everyone's like, what's Twitch? Can we use it? Can we use it? You know, and it was kind of more about, shit, let's try all the new platforms and see which ones work for us. And it was really kind of more mad rush of suddenly digital is really important, and do we have an app, and let's develop a website. And it was kind of more a bit of a panic in that sense. And I find the artists are the ones who suffered the most in this time, because yes, they're the most innovative and creative, but actually there's not really anywhere to go for them or to kind of apply for funding. It's suddenly become all the entire business model somewhat crumbling, while a lot of the organizations are somewhat, you know, nurtured by the state anyway, so that they have a different, they're just trying to prove their case or cause.
We're not. Okay, we're not.
Oh, good. No, well, but in classical music, a lot is, you know, and that's why they have a different business model to prove right now. And how do we actually reach people, and how can we do what we're doing normally as an organization with physical presence online? And I think a lot of them suddenly have a lot of question marks and a lot of, you know, only 10 people wanting to watch their live stream. So really, what is their reach? And should they have 2 million in state funding, for example? So there's an interesting kind of development going on, and technology is becoming suddenly a necessity. So a lot of, we've actually had a really big upturn of new clients and new projects come our way. and people wanting to build apps and wanting to be innovative and create new ideas, because people suddenly need to invest in that side who probably beforehand weren't that keen. So it's been a mixture. I'd say the artists are the ones who are looking forward to some element of live business coming back, because they need to be booked to actually have work and clients. And we had a lot who also used, you know, the Kickstarter element or some sort of Patreon platform where you could subscribe to them on a monthly basis and they would create content for you, etc. But that's not a long-term viable business model for them as well. So the issue has mainly been in the length as well, that because it's going on for such a long time, they're really struggling to find their place and actually make a revenue out of it, while organizations have a different, I think, objective with it.
Well, what a great way to go over to Lutz, because as a contrast, a lot of the ones that you're representing are not state funded. So Lutz, why don't you go ahead and tell us what happened in Berlin when Corona hit? And obviously, you know, then we go into UNITEDWESTREAM.
Yeah, maybe to refer to Kathleen just a second, because you know, one of the reasons why also artists are suffering is because we are still a third world country when it comes to royalties and how these gonna be distributed. And the reason why people use Twitch is because it works, or it used to work for a time, that it doesn't break up the stream like it does at Facebook. So I mean, we really have to transform the industry and also think about revenue streams for artists, and not just find the next illegal platform to present them. At UNITEDWESTREAM, we try to, you know, shift around this topic a bit by involving Arte Concert. It's a public TV station, European-wide. They have all the contracts with the royalty organizations. So by streaming through them and using their contracts, we kind of, yeah, moved around a bit on this topic, but still it is something which we are discussing, and we also don't have an answer yet, because the royalty organizations doesn't really have one as well. Well, when we had the shutdown on March the 13th, that was the initial point that we said we have to create something what is once a donation platform or a crowdfunding platform to get some funding that makes us a bit independent from government money, that of course we also needed, but in that moment it was more like, oh my God, we need something to be to kind of react on the situation. And to combine this with streaming and with showing empty clubs, I think was a good move, especially because we were very fast. We launched the platform 5 days later and had already a stream lined up with the first 10, 15 clubs. And that was only possible because we had a network like the Club Commission, which is representing 300 clubs and promoters in the city and doing this advocacy work since now 20 years. And then you have enough trust, you have the connections, you know the people, and this was, you know, in a few days that we got all these puzzle pieces together and launched a few days later. Yeah, and then it took off. I mean, it was a success. We were probably one of the first who did it, and then other cities and countries adapted the model and joined this kind of open source project. It's not technologically open source, but it is the idea of creating kind of a brand that everybody can use to create an own digital audience and make partnerships and everything. That is something which we want to enable people. And UNITEDWESTREAM also means that in some cities and countries where the scene is also very competitive and not really friendly to each other, this is also a way of uniting them and bringing them together on one digital platform, asking the audience for support, and small venues get support of the bigger ones. And we also decided that 8% of our income will go to a social cause. And so we also have now, I think, in total 50,000 euros that we can also donate to the civil sea rescue, because we thought it's also important that we also look outside of our own bubble, you know, who is suffering even more, and also create attention, because that is always the the risk in such a big crisis that the poorest of the poor don't get any attention anymore. So that was a very important part for us too. So in total, we now collected 550,000 euros in Berlin, and then globally, I think 1.5 million euros. It doesn't save the club scene, you know, not to be understood incorrectly, because we need about 10 million just in Berlin every month to pay our 9,000 people who work for the clubs and pay rents and everything. But not even calculated the many booking agencies, festival organizers, artists who are not employed, of course. These are all these costs which are not even included. So it's a big challenge, and we are happy that our lobby work, the work that we are advocating for the scene in the last year, really worked in this crisis. We now got access to a lot of cultural programs of the federal and state support packages or emergency packages. That means that we really can have access to not just economies support, but also cultural support packages. So yeah, that's the situation. Now we are in month number, what is it, 4? We didn't lose a club yet. We unfortunately lost 1 or 2 venues, like a bar closed down, which also had some DJ bookings, and a tango loft. But we are constantly in a juggling situation, doing surveys to our stakeholders and look into their liquidity, and that we can mirror this to the politicians. How long we survive.
Yeah, and I mean, I know we in Berlin and Germany, we applaud you for being able to react so quickly. One question in terms of learning, a big pain point, when you guys were scaling, when you had to scale so quickly, what's the one thing that you learned in that process that you could think back on?
Well, you know, if you have a certain idea about a project, the faster you're scaling, the less information is received at the end of the line. So, for instance, when it comes to the programming, we were very much into authenticity and into originality, and also, of course, we have our own awareness manifesto where we say we want at least 50% female bookings. We didn't get quite reach that in Berlin, but we have almost 40% now, which I think is also very remarkable. And and then if one of the platforms, let's say in a Spanish country or in a Spanish city or in a Eastern European city where they don't have so many females as artists, has only male lineups, that's something where we also get internal discussions very fast. So we also have to learn that this is a very important part, because otherwise we get it backslashed. So the soft factors, the glue basically of this project also needs to be very much being cared of, and not just the technology and scaling part.
I think everyone can probably agree on that point. What I heard out of this was when it comes to revenue for artists, there's still no answer for that yet. So if there's anyone out there that wants to collaborate or has any ideas, I think that seems to be a really big pain point, regardless of where you are in the music industry. So that's something for anyone in the audience, if to think of. And one other question that we had was, have any of you guys thought about or know of technologies that might be used once people can meet again, to make sure that the risks are lowered for the virus to spread if people were to be able to meet in a physical space? Someone had mentioned some air filtration, or how could you keep people, if they meet, or what technologies might there be? Have you guys heard of anything that people are working on in order to allow people to come together physically again?
Well, sorry.
Go ahead. Oh, sorry. We have working groups which are specialized in this, and we're talking to a lot of app developers, but also ventilating companies, and even some chemistry that you can spread, like kind of hygiene sprays. I mean, there's a lot of hocus pocus out there. I'm not really sure if all of that works. I think the most important part is social distancing, as we learned in the last month. No one of us is a virologist, so we always have to learn day by day what is actually possible and not. In our case, we're focusing right now on everything which is outside of buildings, because we see that venues that are closed, that are maybe a bit splattered, I don't know, smaller rooms everywhere, not as good ventilated, that this can create this kind of petri dish that you kind of spread the virus in a few hours very easily, and so for us it's right now a focus on open air. We want to use the Berlin summer as good as possible. For everybody who's interested in this topic, we just released today a paper, which is an international collaboration with Harvard University, Fraunhofer Institute, and other scholars. It's published on nighttime.org, and it's a free paper to download, and it's focusing right on this: what can we do in this crisis to use public space, open air, better efficiently, and also start a discussion on the technology side, which is out there, but maybe also needs to be tested. But maybe Leander can relate to that a bit better as a practitioner.
Yeah, we do a lot of shows in venues as well. So I think every responsible promoter will think about ways of handling the situation next year, and whatever, we're back to live entertainment in the way we used to experience it. It's not as simple. I think technology will maybe help us, but that's really not what's going to be the game changer. The game changer will be, we have to come back to live entertainment without social distancing, because there is really, to be honest, there's no way producing an event with 1.5 meters or 2 meters away from each other. You're not going to fit enough people into a venue or any open air scenario. It's just not going to be profitable. And that's the bitter truth, to be honest. So what are the ways of making it safer? I think indoor venues will have a ventilation problem, as you mentioned, stuff like that. But it's really, there's ways of figuring it out to cope with that. And I think that's something that everybody has to do now. Now is the time to do it. If you don't do it now, it'll be too late. It'll definitely be too late. We'll see a run on I think regulation next year, and then everybody will adapt it, even if it's not helpful at all. So I think a helpful discussion is with the authorities, the local authorities on state level, on a federal level, on a regional level, to figure out how to operate your venues, your open air scenarios, whatever it is, to make it as safe as possible. For us, that we've already implemented that communication months ago, and I think we're pretty far, pretty good with everybody and figuring it out what we can do. But really, we have to come back to what we knew as in the distance, because there's just not going to be a way of having an event with any distance measure. Technology might be helpful, but on the other hand, we don't really see anything right now, because no app will ever help you. That's a data policy. I think it's more of the physical measures and the responsible organization of what will help you, and that your technology, as in engineered infrastructure, will help you, and measures like more opportunities to wash your hands, more sanitization opportunities, more ventilation in indoor venues, better queuing, and maybe even wearing a mask, because that's what a lot of outdoor venues see in the summer when it's dusty. And we've had the last 2 summers were really dry, and a lot of festivals were handing out face masks to protect you from dust coming in. Now that works the other way around, and that is something that's sensible and that we can do, and we can limit that to certain areas, and we can educate everybody. And I think if a broader alliance will communicate that we're even in even better shape. But what's not going to work is some idea of creating an event where you use the same amount of space for a third amount of people and ask them to sit away from each other and do something as crazy as that. Really. Technology, maybe, looking for it, haven't seen anything, let me know.
All right, Kathleen, maybe some insights from your side, maybe you know.
Oh man, no, I think they've both said it really well. There's not really much at the moment that gives hope to the idea of technology overtaking the actual live event, at least on the big side. I think in classical music and culture, because a lot of them are only a group of 2 or 4 artists, and the audiences are much smaller sometimes, so we fit in maybe 50 people, and they are finding different ways of making that happen at the moment outdoors and kind of socially distanced. And in Germany, the government is kind of loosening, so indoor events up to 500 people are going to be happening now. And there are things happening, but it's still scratching the surface, especially for the big organizers, really on the revenue streams and the income streams. So no, sadly, no magic portion at the moment in tech for that one.
Well, literally the magic potion, I think, as Lutz also wrote in, it would be a vaccine. So let's all be hopeful for that. And as we wrap this up, I would like to give the panelists one last question for you to think about as I'm wrapping this up. Think about what your most favorite music gadget is that you ever had. I'll give you like a minute for it. While I'm wrapping up, I want to thank our audience for being part, and that you get to see the part 1 of our music and tech that we had with Matthias Strobel from Music Tech Germany. It's on YouTube. And write in your calendars, on the 19th of August, we will be talking to the CEO of Ableton, Gerhard Beres, about how to give back once you are a corporate, which would be very interesting. And we're going to be sending out a feedback form with all the web pages that we just had in the panel discussion. So you guys can contact any of the speakers if you like, or also join one of our private network groups. So we will go ahead and start with the ladies first. Kathleen?
I am decidedly uncool. I think I'm old school. I still love Spotify. I'm a big fan. Can't change it. It's one of my things. I just find all my new music there. I love the Discovery Weekly. I'm very big on them. Can't change it. And I would say probably the biggest one for me in terms of physical things that's happened is Alexa. I use Alexa a lot. She talks to me. She's friendly to me.
All right.
On music.
And
yeah.
I give Leander the first. I have to really think first.
I was going to say the same thing as Kat. The little app from Sweden is really good.
Oh, wow. I cannot be more creative, I think. No, I think technology is a very important part of my daily life. But I also realized that I think 99% of the apps I have on my phone, I just used once. So I just probably have to look at these mentioned WhatsApps and Spotify's and Skypes and all these kind of technologies that I'm using basically day on day. And that's probably a very probably boring but true answer.
All right. I was surprised no one mentioned the 1,000 songs in your pocket. I think that was very memorable. So I would like to thank you all for being part of this really great panel. And with that, wishing you all good luck, especially Leander, with the event that you guys have coming up. And we look forward to hearing more about what the industry is going to continue to do as we all miss it very dearly. So thank you for all your insights and your knowledge, and take care. And with that, we'll say goodbye.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.